It is 2005, in the cold inland water between Washington State and British Columbia, and a researcher named Deborah Giles is watching something that does not make sense. There is a dead harbor porpoise in the water. It is not being eaten, it is being carried. A pod of killer whales has it balanced across their snouts, and they are moving it between them, lifting it, passing it, keeping it up near the surface. The animal is already dead. The whales keep going anyway. Giles would later say she had no idea what she was looking at. It did not make any sense, and the conclusion most people would reach, watching a killer whale kill something, is the obvious one. Predators kill. That is the whole job. A porpoise is meat. An orca is the most effective marine predator on the planet, and what you are watching is simply a hunt with an unusually long ending, except these particular whales will not eat it. Not that day, not ever. They will kill porpoises and leave every gram of them floating in the water. And they have been documented doing it for more than 60 years, and here is the part that should stop you. That specific population of killer whales is starving. There are around 75 of them left alive. They are endangered. They are underfed, and the food they need is collapsing. They are killing protein and refusing to touch it while going hungry. This file is not about how killer whales hunt. It is about the things they do that have no function at all, and what the ocean's most intelligent predator is telling us when it kills something it has no intention of eating. Start by taking away the easy answer, because the easy answer is wrong, and the reason it is wrong opens up everything else. The obvious explanation is that this is hunting. Killer whales do kill marine mammals. Some populations specialize in it. They take seals off ice floes. They run down dolphins. They attack whales many times their size. If you have seen footage of orcas hunting, there is a decent chance you have seen mammal-eating orcas at work, but those are not these whales. The killer whales in this story are called the southern residents, and here is the thing that reframes the whole file. Killer whales are not really one animal. Across the world, they have split into distinct populations, sometimes called ecotypes, that live in the same water, look broadly similar, and have almost nothing to do with each other. Different diets, different hunting techniques, different social structures, different vocal dialects, and in many cases, they do not interbreed, do not socialize, and do not mix, even when they pass each other in the same channel. In these particular waters, two of them overlap. There are mammal-hunting killer whales, and there are the southern residents, who eat fish, almost exclusively salmon, and overwhelmingly one particular kind of salmon. Depending on the season, Chinook salmon makes up somewhere between half and effectively all of their diet. Deborah Giles put the situation plainly. People constantly ask why the southern residents do not simply eat seals or porpoises instead of starving. And her answer is that fish-eating killer whales have a completely different ecology and culture from the ones that eat mammals. Even when they share the same water, they are not failing to hunt porpoises. They are not trying to, which means the killing has to be explained some other way. And the record of it is far bigger than one afternoon in 2005. In 2023, a team led by Giles and a researcher named Teman published an analysis in the journal Marine Mammal Science that pulled the whole thing into one place for the first time. They went back through more than 6 decades of recorded encounters between southern resident killer whales and porpoises in that inland sea, and assembled every incident anyone had ever documented. The first was recorded in 1962. By the time the record was closed for the study, in 2020, there were 78 documented incidents of these whales harassing porpoises. 28 of those ended with the porpoise dead. Not one of them was eaten. The team then broke the incidents down by which whales were involved. If this were a rare glitch, a few disturbed individuals, you would expect it to cluster. It did not. It was spread through the population, across pods, across sexes, across ages, with a handful of individuals showing a particular enthusiasm for it. Juveniles were the most frequent participants. The old matriarchs were the ones who mostly stayed out of it, and the behavior was moving. It had been passed between generations and across social groups. This was not instinct misfiring in isolated animals. It was being transmitted, so the researchers were left holding 60 years of evidence for a behavior with no nutritional purpose, spreading socially through an endangered population. What they did with that evidence is the part that matters. They offered 3 explanations, and they were careful to say that all 3 are hypotheses, not conclusions. The first is play. Killer whales are intensely social, and by any reasonable measure, they play. What the observers recorded looks uncomfortably like a game. Whales carrying the porpoise on their backs, multiple animals shouldering it between them. A kind of contest to keep it out of the water, and crucially, they were often seen continuing to interact with the porpoise long after it had died, which suggests that killing it was never really the objective. The death is a byproduct. The activity is the point. The second is practice. These are salmon hunters, and Chinook salmon are fast, slippery, and require precise coordinated pursuit. A porpoise is a moving target that fights back. Chasing one may be training, particularly for young whales still learning the mechanics of the chase. The third explanation is the one that is hard to read about. It is called misdirected caretaking. Killer whales, particularly females, display strong nurturing behavior, and they have been observed carrying and supporting sick, injured, or dead members of their own family. A distressed harbor porpoise is small, and it makes distress calls, and to a whale it may present as something that needs help. Under this reading, some of these incidents are not aggression at all. They are an attempt to care for something, carried out by an animal that has no way of understanding that its attention is lethal. 3 explanations. And when a journalist asked Giles which one was correct, her answer was direct. The bottom line is, they do not know why they do it. That sentence is not a failure of the study. It is the most valuable thing in it. And to see why, you have to look at what else these whales have done, because the porpoises are not an isolated case. There is a documented history of southern resident killer whales doing elaborate, coordinated, socially transmitted things for no reason anyone has ever been able to identify. And the most famous one is so absurd that it sounds invented. In the summer of 1987, a female killer whale in Puget Sound was seen swimming with a dead salmon balanced on her head, not carrying it in her mouth, not saving it in any way anyone could explain. Balanced on her forehead, near the blowhole, like a hat. Within weeks, other whales were doing it. It spread from her pod to the neighboring pods, and eventually it was showing up across the entire population. For one season, killer whales in that stretch of water were swimming around wearing dead fish on their heads. Then it stopped. By the following year it was over, as abruptly as it had started, and it did not come back. Look at the shape of that event, because the shape is the important part. It starts with one individual. It spreads through social contact rather than instinct. It serves no identifiable survival function. It persists for a period, and then the population loses interest and it disappears. That is not a biological behavior. That is a fad. Researchers use exactly that word for it, and the reason they can is that killer whales pass behavior to each other by watching. The same way they pass down dialects and hunting techniques, and which foods count as food. Their traditions are learned, and anything learned can become fashionable, and anything fashionable can go out of fashion, which brings us to a moment that tested whether this channel is honest. In October of 2024, a photographer in Puget Sound captured a southern resident killer whale, a male known to researchers as Blackberry. with a fish laid across the top of his head. The image went around the world. The salmon hat was back, nearly 40 years later, and the story wrote itself. Except several researchers immediately pushed back. The director of the Orca Behavior Institute said flatly that calling it a salmon hat was a stretch, and calling a single photograph the return of a fad was a much bigger stretch. Others noted that no further images of these whales wearing salmon followed. One picture is not a trend. There were competing explanations too. That autumn, there was an unusual abundance of chum salmon in the area. And when there is plenty of food, these whales spend less time foraging and more time socializing and playing. So it might be play, or it might be storage. A fish parked somewhere convenient to eat later, since mammal hunting killer whales have been seen tucking chunks of food under a pectoral fin. And a salmon may simply be too small for that. So the honest version is this: the fad in 1987 is real and well documented. Whether it returned in 2024 is contested, and the people who study these animals for a living do not agree. But a fad in one small population could still be dismissed as a local curiosity. What happened on the other side of the Atlantic makes that impossible. In May of 2020, off the Iberian Peninsula, sailors began reporting that killer whales were ramming their boats. The pattern was consistent from the start, and it has stayed consistent. The whales approach slow-moving sailing boats, usually of medium size. They come from behind, often silently, so that the first sign of their presence is the impact. And then they go for one specific part of the vessel, the rudder. They push it, they bend it, they bite it, and sometimes they snap it off entirely. Then they leave. From 2020 into this year, more than 500 of these interactions have been reported. Boats have been damaged in large numbers. A handful have sunk, and the whole thing is being done by a very small number of animals. The Iberian killer whale population is critically endangered and numbers only a few dozen individuals in total. Researchers have identified the specific whales involved through photographs and named them, and the participants are a group of roughly 15. Most of them are juveniles and young adults. Other whales are frequently present nearby and do not take part. Now, the explanation that spread fastest was revenge. The story was that a female named White Gladys suffered a traumatic collision with a boat and began attacking rudders in retaliation and taught the others to do it. It is a compelling story. Some researchers have proposed a version of it seriously, suggesting a bad experience conditioned her to target the rudder as a threat to be neutralized. But look at what the whales actually do. Because the evidence is not comfortable with the revenge reading, they target the rudder and almost nothing else. When boats sink and people end up in the water, the whales do not touch them. Not once in more than 500 interactions across 6 years has a person been injured. These animals are entirely capable of destroying every vessel they approach and killing everyone aboard. Researchers have pointed out that if sinking boats were the objective, they could have sunk hundreds. They have not. The leading explanation is the same one from the salmon hats. It is play, and it is a fad, spreading socially through a small group of young animals who find something rewarding in the physical sensation of pushing a moving rudder. There is even a possible reason it started when it did. Their main prey, Atlantic bluefin tuna, has become more abundant, which means less time spent hunting and more time with nothing to do. The behavior has not burned out. In October of 2025, record numbers of these interactions were recorded off the Galician coast in northern Spain. So we have 3 separate cases on 2 continents in populations that have never met. Porpoises killed and abandoned, fish worn as hats, rudders methodically destroyed. None of it feeds them. All of it spreads socially. And in every case, the researchers closest to the evidence say some version of the same thing. We are not certain why, and if the file stopped there, It would leave you with a particular picture of these animals: intelligent, bored, and casually destructive. That picture is incomplete, and the thing that completes it was only discovered because somebody bought a better drone. Researchers had been studying the southern residents for close to 50 years. In 2024, a team flying drones over them saw something nobody had ever recorded. And once they knew what to look for, they started seeing it everywhere. Over a short observation window, they documented 30 separate occurrences across all 3 pods, involving whales of every age from calves to the oldest matriarchs. What the whales were doing was this: a killer whale takes hold of a stalk of bull kelp with its teeth, then swims so that the drag of the water tears off a short section of the stem. That length of kelp is now a different object than it was on the seafloor. The whale has modified it. Then it positions that piece between its own body and the body of another whale, usually a close relative or an animal of similar age, and the two of them roll it back and forth between them. The researchers named it Allokelping and published it in the journal Current Biology in 2025. It is the first time any cetacean has been recorded using an object as a grooming tool, and it goes further than that, because the whales are not simply picking up something useful. They are taking a thing that would not work as it is and altering it until it does. That is manufacture. There are 2 leading explanations, and they may both be true. One is skin care. These whales shed dead skin, and skin lesions have been increasing in this population. And bull kelp has antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. The other is social bonding. The same reason primates groom each other, except that primate grooming runs one way, and this runs both ways at once. Both animals are being groomed. Both are doing the grooming. Sit with the contrast for a moment. The same 70-odd animals that drown porpoises for no nutritional reason and abandon the bodies are also making tools out of seaweed to massage their grandchildren. It is the same population. In several cases, it is likely the same individuals. Both of those things come from the same place: a brain that generates behavior beyond what survival requires, and a society that transmits that behavior by watching. Culture does not sort itself into things we would call good and things we would call disturbing. It produces both from the same machinery, and the animal doing it does not experience the difference the way we do. And the researchers who found the kelp behavior attached a warning to it that lands harder than anything else in this file. Both the whales and the kelp are in trouble. Bull kelp is declining across much of the habitat these whales depend on. There are only about 73 of them left, which brings us to the starving whales, and to the one number in this file that changes what all of it means. Return to the southern residents. There are around 75 of them left. They are dying, and the mechanism is not mysterious. It is the salmon. Their survival is bound to Chinook salmon, and Chinook salmon have collapsed. Dammed rivers, degraded spawning habitat, warming water, a century of decisions that is not speculation, and it is not contested. When there is not enough Chinook, these whales starve, and when they starve, they fail to reproduce. And a population of 75 does not survive many years of that. Now hold that against everything you have just heard. They are surrounded by food: harbor porpoises, seals, other marine mammals, moving through the same water every day, hunted successfully by the other killer whales who share that sea. Protein is not absent from their world, and they have demonstrated 78 documented times that they are entirely capable of catching a porpoise. They will not eat it. Not because they cannot, because their culture says it is not food. Salmon is what their family eats, what their mothers ate, what has been taught down the generations. And the researchers who study them do not expect that to change even under extinction pressure. In their own words, the culture of eating salmon is deeply ingrained in southern resident society. That is the answer to why they kill things they do not eat. For these animals, food is not a category of calories. It is a category of identity. A porpoise can be a toy, a training exercise, possibly even something to be cared for, and still not be dinner. Because what counts as dinner was decided by their ancestors and is not up for revision. They are holding a line their bodies would rather they crossed. And there is something else in that, which is harder to look at. They are performing behaviors with no survival function, while the thing that keeps them alive disappears. There is nothing hopeful in that. But there is nothing stupid in it either. It is what a culture looks like from the outside. When the world that culture was built for is being taken apart. We did not take their salmon on purpose. We dammed rivers for power, and cleared land, and fished. And each decision made sense to whoever made it. But this is a population of about 75 animals with a tradition too old to abandon, starving beside food they refuse to recognize. In water we emptied, so the answer to the question this file opened with turns out not to be about violence at all. The killings are not hunts, and the boats are not vengeance. What we are watching in every one of these cases is culture, behavior invented by an individual, transmitted by watching, held by a group for reasons that have nothing to do with survival, and dropped again when the group loses interest. Play that turns lethal. Fashion in fish, a destructive craze among bored teenagers with no natural predators. The evidence for that is strong, and the honest limit of it is that nobody has been able to prove which specific motivation drives any single incident, and the people who know these animals best say so out loud. But the reason it unsettles us is not scientific. We watch an orca kill something it will not eat, and we call it senseless, because we expect an animal's actions to be accounted for by hunger. Ours are not. We do enormous amounts of work that feeds no one. We invent things and copy them from each other and abandon them a year later. We take a habit from one person and spread it through a population until it defines us, and then drop it and cannot explain why we ever cared. We hold on to traditions past the point where they serve us, sometimes at real cost, because giving them up would mean becoming something other than ourselves. There is only one other animal on this planet that behaves this way. It is the one asking the question, and there is a last turn in it. The southern residents are dying because of a decision their culture will not let them make. Whether we are capable of making ours is currently being tested in the same water, and we have had a great deal more warning than they have. So here is what Apex Files once argued out in the comments. And it is not a small one. If a starving animal refuses food because its traditions do not recognize it as food, is that a failure of intelligence? Or is it the clearest proof of intelligence we have ever recorded in the ocean? Pick a side and defend it, because your answer says as much about what you think culture is worth as it does about whales. And if a file that ends in uncertainty is more interesting to you than a file that ends in a confident lie, hit like and subscribe, because that is the whole reason this channel exists. The next case belongs to an animal that has been alive since before the country you are watching this from existed, and nobody can explain how. Apex Files. Case open.